On this Wednesday night, the pandemic's consequences for kids, the toll it's taking mentally and physically,
I miss playing with my friends,
and the ramifications of keeping children out of school too long. Canada denied a UN Security Council seat, the significance of this loss. Our economic health, the details Ottawa could soon reveal and omit about Canada's finances. An Atlanta police officer charged with murder. New developments in the Rayshard Brooks investigation. And kicked in the assets.
It's been a nightmare.
How small soccer teams are trying to stay in the game.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. We begin with red flags being raised about the health and well-being of our children. They'd usually be wrapping up classes now, going to graduation ceremonies and looking ahead to summer jobs and camps. That's all changed this year. And doctors at Toronto's Sick Kids Hospital, the biggest pediatric institution in the country, say the loss of these important moments of social development could have a worrisome impact. Mike Armstrong has our top story tonight.
You could probably visit any park in Canada and find some kids pretty pumped about school being cancelled.
It's the best thing that ever happened in my life.
But as things have dragged on, more and more are missing classes and everything that comes with it. This girl says she hates the coronavirus because she can't see her friends or her teacher. Well, there is a growing chorus of experts who say keeping kids at home is doing more harm than good. Remote learning and Zoom meetings aren't enough.
Okay, good morning, everyone.
A panel of experts at Toronto Sick Kids held an online press conference Wednesday with the message that children can't wait for a cure or a vaccine against COVID-19.
It's going to be around for a long time. And the alternative of having children not in school for months and potentially a year or two are just untenable.
Now, the panel doesn't question the decision to close schools back in March. Knowing what we knew then, it was the right move. But it says we now know more. The danger of holding classes doesn't seem as bad as originally thought. Children don't catch the virus often. They're only about 5% of all cases in Canada. And when they do catch it, generally it's mild. There have also been studies around the world showing kids don't really put teachers at risk.
Generally, what we see is children get infected from adults and not the other way around.
Now, the panel says governments are underestimating the impact of canceling school. There are the physical problems, kids aren't as active, but there's also the mental side of it.
A significant proportion of children have experienced increased depression, anxiety, irritability.
Not having kids in school means vaccines aren't happening when they're supposed to, and learning disabilities aren't being diagnosed as early as they could be. The panel says elementary and high schools should reopen in the fall with precautions, things like more hand washing and screening for symptoms. But it says being strict about physical distancing or masks might have a negative impact and increase anxiety.
I think as a general statement, we don't think that masks should be required.
One thing the panel says would help is telling families and children when they're going back. Just getting periodic updates means waves of hope and disappointment, and again, only increases the stress. Mike Armstrong, Global News, Montreal.
Many kids weren't physically active before this pandemic. Now things are even worse. A report card from the nonprofit group Participaction gives Canadian kids a D+ for overall physical activity. That's based on 2 years of data ending in February. It found 39% are getting at least 60 minutes of moderate to vigorous physical activity per day. That's the minimum to maintain healthy living. No surprise that screen time is a big factor in children's sedentary behavior, which also scored a D+. Participaction says parents need to lead by example. They need to set limits for the amount of time kids spend with devices, make a point of setting aside screen-free family time, and not allow screens in children's bedrooms. That not only invites more usage, it also affects the amount of sleep kids get. Quebec's chief coroner has ordered an inquiry into COVID-19 deaths in long-term care facilities and other residential homes for vulnerable people. More than 60% of Quebec's COVID-19 deaths have occurred in public or private long-term care homes. The inquiry will look at deaths recorded between March 12th and May 1st. The point is not to lay blame, but to determine the cause and circumstance of the deaths and provide recommendations on how to prevent it happening in the future. The coroner will hear testimony in public and will make the final report available to all. Well, this pandemic is having a massive impact on Canada's economy, and Ottawa has been under pressure to present a clear picture of how bad it really is.
We do realize that it's important for us to continue to be transparent with Canadians. And that's why on July 8th, our government will move forward to present an economic snapshot of our current situation to ensure that Canadians understand where we're at and to help them to have confidence in our future together.
It's a snapshot, not an update. The Prime Minister says the pandemic has created too much uncertainty to be specific about the numbers, but critics say there is no good reason to be so vague. Abigail Beeman explains what we can expect and what we won't get.
We come into this budget.
We all know what a budget is.
Economic and fiscal update.
Most of us have heard of the lighter economic update. But what the Prime Minister is promising mid-pandemic is something new.
On July 8th, our government will be releasing an economic and fiscal snapshot.
Justin Trudeau says the snapshot will pull together what's been done, how other countries are doing, and look forward, but just a little.
I think it would be a little bit unrealistic to project much further than a few months because things are changing so rapidly.
I don't think it's unrealistic.
Former Parliamentary Budget Officer Kevin Page says Canadians need more information, and given uncertainty, the government could present a few different scenarios.
I think we should get a strategic plan for recovery. So, to what extent is the government going to use stimulus to support growth?
There have been billions spent on support programs. The Parliamentary Budget Officer has provided updates on a range of topics. We know the unemployment rate hit a record 13.7% in May, and we've seen 2 months in a row of negative inflation. But there are still unanswered questions.
I mean, if the Prime Minister is brave enough to wade into crowds, I'm sure the Finance Minister should be able to wade into the House of Commons and provide the update.
Economics professor Livio Di Matteo points out budgets were tabled during world wars.
And those were periods, in some sense, of even greater crisis, given what was at stake than what is going on now.
The dictionary defines snapshot for a hunter as a shot quickly taken without deliberate aim. Will the debt exceed $1 trillion?
We are looking forward to providing the information that will come out in our July 8th presentation.
Questions, too, about the extension of the Canada Emergency Response Benefit and whether it acts as a deterrent against going back to work.
That's why we're beefing up our attestation to include a requirement on workers to seek work and to take it when it's reasonable to do so.
The Prime Minister said we're moving through the emergency phase and towards recovery, but he wouldn't say when we may see a full budget or an economic update. Abigail Beeman, Global News, Ottawa.
Beyond dealing with pandemic pressures at home, the Liberal government is also dealing with a major loss on the world stage. It was a close vote, but Canada has failed in its bid to secure a seat on the UN Security Council. The vote took place today at the United Nations in New York City. Foreign Affairs Minister François-Philippe Champagne was there to cast the ballot for Canada. It wasn't enough. In a race with Norway and Ireland for 2 of the open seats, Canada secured the fewest votes. Our chief political correspondent, David Akin, is following developments for us. David, Canada came close, but a loss is a loss. What is the theory on why Canada fell short and couldn't get enough countries to support us?
Yeah, you're right, Donna. A loss is a loss. And it was one of the closest races that UN watchers tell me they've ever seen in the history of the UN. Let me break it down. You need 128 votes to get on the Security Council. Norway got 130. Ireland got 128, right on the nose, and Canada was back at 108. So now the Canadian government officials, their big question is, what went wrong?
Each country has 193 different reasons why they would support one country or another. And this is, this is the politics of the UN that is very tricky and very difficult and complex. And we will have plenty of time to actually look at that.
Couple of things that Ambassador Blanchard will likely look at: peacekeeping commitments and overseas foreign aid. Canada's foreign aid is half, and has been for a long time, of what Norway's is. And as far as peacekeeping goes, well, Canada has never had so few peacekeepers on UN missions in more than 70 years, and that matters with the UN voter. Another problem with the Canadian bid: it started way too late. Canada's been campaigning for 4 or 5 years now. Norway and Ireland, they've been campaigning for a decade, and they'd already locked up so many votes by the time Canada came asking for them, Donna.
David, what might this say about Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, who worked so hard to try to win this seat on the UN Security Council?
Well, even Prime Minister's own cabinet was telling him that this bid, it was all on him, succeed or fail. And foreign policy experts are telling me tonight that this is terrible for the Prime Minister politically because he was so personally invested in this bid. He did not do a good job explaining why Canada should have a Security Council seat at this time, and it's really only been in the last few weeks in which he's formed a more coherent pitch to voters. You know, back in 2015 when the Trudeau Liberals took over, they used to go around town boasting their foreign policy would be all about Canada is back. Well, not so much. Justin Trudeau joined Stephen Harper and William Lyon Mackenzie King as the only prime ministers that failed at their attempts to win a Security Council seat. Donna?
All right. David Akin in Ottawa. Thank you. The families of the people killed in that mass shooting in Nova Scotia in April have filed a proposed class action lawsuit against the RCMP and the province. 22 people were killed by a gunman over a 13-hour period. The proposed lawsuit alleges the RCMP had a duty to protect the safety and security of the public and failed. That includes a failure to send timely and appropriate warnings to the community. The lawsuit is also seeking punitive damages from the RCMP for the way it handled the investigation. This is the second proposed class action lawsuit. The victims' families are also seeking damages against the estate of the gunman who was killed by police. It was a bit of a wild afternoon in the House of Commons. The NDP leader Jagmeet Singh was kicked out after refusing to apologize for calling the Bloc Québécois House leader a racist.
It's true. I called him a racist.
Singh was seeking unanimous consent on a motion about systemic racism in the RCMP. There was at least one objection that blocked it, though it was unclear who said no. Singh believes it was the Bloc House leader.
And in that moment, I got angry. I'll be honest, I got angry. But I'm sad now. Because why can't we act? Why can't we do something to save people's lives? We can do something. And why would someone say no to that?
A fired Atlanta police officer has been charged with murder and could face life in prison or the death penalty if found guilty. Garrett Rolfe is accused of murdering 27-year-old Rayshard Brooks outside a Wendy's restaurant in Atlanta last week. And a warning, some of the video you're about to see is disturbing. The Fulton County, Georgia District Attorney has issued an arrest warrant for Garrett Rolfe. He fired 2 bullets into Brooks' back last Friday night as the unarmed black man was running away. Rolfe is also facing 10 other charges, including aggravated assault. The shooting took place after Brooks was found sleeping in his car at a Wendy's drive-thru. The district attorney says Brooks was calm and cordial when police approached him and cooperated, calmly answering questions for more than 40 minutes. He was never informed he was being charged with impaired driving. The struggle started when police tried to handcuff him. At one point, Brooks grabbed Rolfe's taser and pointed it over his shoulder as he ran away. The DA has concluded Brooks posed no deadly threat.
We have also concluded that Rolfe was aware that the taser in Brooks's possession, that it was fired twice. And once it's fired twice, it presented no danger to him or to any other persons.
Howard says after Rolfe shot Brooks, he said, "I got him." Then he kicked him while he lay on the ground and failed to seek medical attention for more than 2 minutes. A second officer, Devin Brosnan, admitted he stood on Brooks' shoulders as he lay on the ground. He is facing 3 counts of aggravated assault and has agreed to testify against his former partner. Both cops have been fired and are asked to turn themselves in by tomorrow. An alarming trend in the U.S. coming up, the deepening concerns as COVID-19 cases rise. As the reopening of the economy in the United States accelerates, so are cases of COVID-19. The rise in positive cases and in hospitalizations in some states is deeply worrying, as Jackson Prosco explains.
With summer looming, Americans are riding a fresh wave of COVID-19. In Florida, a new hotspot, a group of 16 friends contracted the virus after a night out.
I was one of those people that like, come on, it's not that serious, and I got it.
Over the last week, in 21 states, case counts have been on the rise. 6 of those states reported record daily increases, with troubling trends in Arizona, Texas, and Florida. Each state reported more than 2,000 new cases per day. The curve is rising sharply.
And it's not just the numbers of cases from testing. It's being paralleled by a big rise in the hospitalizations.
Far from worried, most states are refusing to lock back down. In Tulsa, Oklahoma, President Donald Trump is set to hold his first campaign rally in months this Saturday, even as cases spike.
The CDC has said unequivocally that this is the highest risk event for transmission of the virus. This is a super spreader event in downtown Tulsa.
In Texas, the governor blocked any move by local mayors to require the use of face masks.
All of us have a collective responsibility to educate the public that wearing a mask is the best thing to do. Putting people in jail, however, is the wrong approach.
The White House has gone so far as to suggest the virus is under control.
If we stop testing right now, we'd have very few cases, if any.
But it's not that simple. Arizona now has one of the highest case positive rates in the world, and hot weather has shown no signs of slowing the virus.
And I'm a real proponent now of dialing things back, getting people out of the bar, getting people, away from crowded areas.
In many corners of the country, that's unlikely to happen, as politics, not science, drives the response to the pandemic. Jackson Prosco, Global News, Washington.
Canadian aerospace company CAE says its new medical ventilator has been certified by Health Canada and is ready to be shipped to hospitals across the country. The Montreal-based company signed a contract with the federal government earlier this year to manufacture and supply 10,000 ventilators. Border orders ahead. New Zealand cracks down after new coronavirus cases pop up. New Zealand has called in the military to take charge of its quarantine operations after a major oversight by health officials. They allowed 2 overseas travelers to leave quarantine early on compassionate grounds. The pair later tested positive for COVID-19.
This case represents an unacceptable failure of the system. It should never have happened, and it cannot be repeated.
New Zealand's Prime Minister says border control policies are being reviewed to ensure more cases aren't imported. They're also working to track down anyone the 2 travelers may have been in contact with after leaving quarantine. The 2 women from the UK tested positive for COVID-19 after driving from Auckland to Wellington. A protester in Britain has been arrested after a fender bender involving the Prime Minister. Boris Johnson's car was leaving Parliament when a Kurdish activist ran towards it. The driver stopped suddenly and was rear-ended by a security vehicle. It caused a dent in the Prime Minister's car, but no injuries, and moments after it happened, the motorcade moved on. Soccer shutout next. The pandemic kicks up major fears for little leagues.
You're watching Global National.
Tennis fans won't get to see their favorites play at the Rogers Cup Men's Tournament this year. It was supposed to happen in August in Toronto, but has been pushed to August of 2021. Founded in 1881, the men's tournament has been held every year except for 1905 and during the First and Second World Wars. There's some good news for soccer fans. After more than 3 months on pause, the English Premier League is back in action and will play the remaining games of the season in near-empty stadiums. But worldwide TV revenue and merchandise will keep those teams afloat. As Redmond Shannon reports, dozens of smaller professional clubs in England and across Europe could face economic collapse.
The world's most watched soccer league, the Premier League, is back. Games are being played inside echoing empty stadiums. Fans can only watch on TV.
But beneath those mega clubs are scores of smaller professional teams like Leyton Orient. With little TV revenue, they rely much more heavily on getting fans in the door to buy tickets, burgers and beers.
Chief Executive Danny Macklin has had to deal with their season being cut short and the prospect of an empty stadium whenever things resume.
We expect at the moment COVID-19 to have an impact of around about 1.5 million of additional cash funding that we will need that we wouldn't have had needed if COVID-19 hadn't have come.
They've had to lose staff and hope fans will pay to stream games online for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, I do fear that there could be a good number of clubs that find the next few months and potentially season very, very challenging.
Orient's struggles were softened by a former player and World Cup superstar Harry Kane. He's now sponsoring the team. But most of England's small teams operate at a loss.
That's difficult to sustain in a normal economic environment. You go into a COVID world and those problems become magnified.
This football finance expert says many smaller teams rely on money from trades.
So it only takes one club in one country to go bankrupt, become insolvent, and then we could have a domino effect across the whole of Europe.
Bury FC was founded in 1885, but money troubles have suspended all football since last year.
We can't resurrect it. If we can't get going again, I'm finished with football. It's been a nightmare for the town. What people don't realise is that a football club is the biggest community asset in any town.
The next 6 months will determine how many other football towns face a similar fate. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
And that is Global National for this Wednesday. I'm Donna Friesen. We leave you tonight with a group of grads making their voices heard in Parliament. This virtual choir of pages led the national anthem for the House of Commons' last June sitting. It's a parliamentary tradition marking the end of the Pages year working in Parliament. This one ended a little different. Hope to see you here again tomorrow. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.